Bonjour, les amis. I hope you're all doing well. We are well into January. And that's always an exciting time to think, wow, okay, we started out the year with all these resolutions and thoughts and things we want to do. And where are we now? Hopefully, we're making progress. And in making progress, often we find how wonderful and helpful it is to rely on others to help us towards that progress. So I wanted today to talk about asking for help. Welcome to Generate Her. I'm Jane Bertch. I spent the first half of my life working in a corporate organization, and then I decided to trade that all in to become an entrepreneur. Yes, here in your favorite city of Paris, France. And today, I hope I'm a guide on your journey to personal reinvention and transformation. Firstly, let me say, when somebody asks me for help, it is such a gift. It's really hard to express how I feel. And I do laugh and say, well, you know what? Maybe it's my only child syndrome. To feel needed is so important. And when somebody confides in me about a secret wish or a desire or a business or something they're working on, when they come to me to ask me for help, I just I'm blown over. And I take it so seriously, those relationships. And that's why I always say I love mentoring. I really love mentoring. And the people that I work with will probably tell you I'm a bit more rigorous than they are because, again, those are such critical relationships. And not that I have so much to teach, but when I do have something to share, I think when you teach, you learn twice. So for all those reasons, helping others is really a foundation of community, isn't it? But recently I saw something that triggered me and it bothered me so much. I ended up doing an Instagram post on it. And I rarely do those. It's a list of ins and outs by somebody that I've known for quite a while. And I really like her content. I'll link to her in the show notes. Her name is Megan. On her out, she had picking people's brains. And the moment I saw picking people's brains, I think it shot my blood pressure up because that is such a pet peeve of mine. Such a pet peeve. So I'm sure you're probably thinking, wait, Jane, you said you like to help people, but then you don't want people picking your brains. What is that? Well, to me, they're two fundamentally different things. They really are. I think one is a wonderful relationship where you're exchanging and you're growing each other. The second one, picking brains, is a very one-sided activity. And I sat with that for a while. And it really made me think, how do I define those and what's important to me? Now, I will say, my thoughts are very much through the lens of being a business person that has very limited time and very limited resources. And number two, having lived in France for many years. So I look at that through those lenses. But even so, I have 5 tips that I want to share with you that I think might be helpful. And hopefully, maybe reassess your approach to asking for help in a better way. So in France, asking for help is usually done when you have a relationship with somebody. And we've talked about how relationships are through time. So I suspect that the incidents of brain picking are actually quite limited because most people, again, please, grain of salt, this is Jane's view on France based on my limited 20-year experience. Most people would not approach somebody without having a connection with them. They would consider it intrusive or bothersome. They would have a relationship with them to do that. Okay, what if you don't have a relationship? Like, here's Jane, moved to France, knows no one. Asking for help can be the start of a wonderful relationship if it's done correctly. So in France, asking for help is usually done when you have a relationship. You usually know the person. And because of that long-term relationship that you have through trust and time, we've talked about those, you have a confidence in that person. So asking them for help is very meaningful. How often do people pick the brains of strangers in France? I think very rarely. This is my opinion. One, I don't think it's necessarily seen as the thing to do. Two, there needs to be a knowledge about who you're engaging with. And to have the respect to ask them to help you, you probably have a good sense of what type of person they are, enough so that you're willing to engage them. Now, what happens if you don't have a relationship? And goodness knows that's been my life for 20 years. They're trying to create them. How can I ask for help? Easily. I do so with the intention of, I'd like this person to be a part of my ecosystem going forward. So anytime I'm asking for help from somebody locally, I've been very thoughtful about our relationship and the longevity of it. It's extraordinarily rare that I would approach someone off the cuff, just needing one thing, gleaning it, and leaving. That is just simply not done. So asking for help can actually be a really beautiful way to start a relationship if you do it thoughtfully. And I want to talk about that, which leads me to my 5 things I've learned over the years about asking for help. Firstly, I am surrounded by incredible business people here in Paris. And frankly, globally, I think this is one of the wonderful things about Instagram is we have a look into so many people around the world. And I watch what they're doing and how they're doing it, and I'm amazed and I'm inspired. And sometimes I think, wow, I'd love to get in touch with that person because I'd love to try to replicate what they're doing. So I've got plenty of people I'd love to ask for help from. But what I've decided intentionally is to approach them having thought about what I can bring to them. It could be as simple as, Mary, I've been watching you for a while and you're doing this new business product that I think is so incredible. I'd love if you'd be willing to share with me how you got there. In exchange, I actually notice this thing that you could do, and I know that you'd be successful. I'd love to share that with you. So before I approach somebody, particularly another small business that's resource scarce, time scarce, I'm going to take time to really see what else they do and perhaps what I can bring to the table. So I'm done with picking brains. I'm done with going in and taking from colleagues. What I want to do is to share resources, to be conscious about how I can help them, to be conscious of what I can bring to the table. Because you know what? I think it's better when we can grow together. I think we're stronger as a community when we consciously imagine and consider how we can help each other. And I want to be very thoughtful about this being a long-term relationship and ally. So that's point one. I want to actively think about how I can help them, what we can exchange, how we can grow together, and how we can improve one another. That can only but make us stronger. Just picking their brains does not. Number 2, we're going to be clear on what we need. We're going to be very clear, like in any relationship, we need to be clear on our needs. And this I find is really a challenge. There's a couple of times that I've jumped into situations not having been clear on what we need to get out of it for each other. And those have never, ever been effective. An example, let's say I see somebody do something on Instagram. Going to them to say, can you help me with Instagram, is not helpful. I get that all the time. I don't know what the heck I'm doing on Instagram. What is helpful is if I go to them and say, listen, I saw this reel you did where you did X, Y, Z, your engagement was up. It looks like people really loved it. Would you be willing to share with me how you did that? And in the spirit of, we're going to have a long-term relationship. By the way, are you on YouTube or are you using this new platform? I've been testing it and it's working for me. I'm happy to help you with that. So let's be extraordinarily clear on what we need. And in a way, maybe consider this like a negotiation. Asking for help is a negotiation. What do you need? What do I need? How do we approach it? So we're both benefiting. And there's a fabulous negotiation book I read not too long ago. I'm going to mention that in the show notes. Number 3, this is a tricky one. This is really tricky because I've been on both sides of this. If you offer to help somebody to do something for free, it deserves the same commitment, time, and attention of your paid services. It deserves the same time, commitment, and attention as your paid services. And I cannot say that enough. This is a sensitive one, I know, particularly I see it with friendship groups. I need help on something. My friend Mary does it well. I don't have a budget for it, but it doesn't mean it's not important to me. It means for whatever reason, I'm not able to allocate a budget towards this activity. So Mary says, I'll help you. Wonderful. And lo and behold, like any human, Mary gets sick of allocating so much of her time to a service that she's not getting financially rewarded for, particularly if she needs to pay her bills and needs to focus her time on efforts that are financially rewarding her. I absolutely get that. And I've been that Mary, where people have asked me to do something and I committed to it. And then at a certain time, I'm thinking, I don't really have time for this and I'm not getting paid for it. And you know what? I had to have a talk with myself to say, so what? You committed to this. This is important to them. So going back to point 2, if we're clear with what our needs are, what our expectations are, that should not arise. If I know the time commitment really that's expected of me, if I know the number of tasks that are expected to me, whether or not it's a free service, if I've committed to it, I'm going to do it. Because what's most important to me thereafter is the relationship. You're going to hear me keep mentioning relationship. And again, I will admit this is probably my doing business in France lens. A relationship is everything. So rather than just considering it a free service, this is where I think barter is so helpful. This is where I think exchanging services and knowledge is so helpful. It doesn't have to be monetary. But if you do that, ensure that you both are attributing the same value. I have an example of this. I asked a friend for help not too long ago on something that was important to me, and I couldn't get my head around it. And I had thought proactively about how I could help them, what I could offer them as a service. And perhaps that service is one, saying that I'm a client and helping to provide testimonials. That service could be helping them to think about their written materials. So if they're pitching business elsewhere, they've got concrete feedback, helping them to smart up their marketing materials, etc. And several times through the process, this friend said to me, well, I'm not getting paid for this. And I was so hurt by that because I thought, well, you are. We're exchanging services. And I think my service is as valuable as yours. So lesson for me is one, make sure there's value attributed to both parties. And two, if I've offered to provide something to somebody, free or not, it's important to them. And reminding them that I'm doing it for free or I'm only doing it for X is not really appropriate. What I need to remind them is how can we continue to trade our services for each other so that we both leave feeling really great about the time we spent together. Number 4, something we forget often. When we agree to work together, great, we both decided we need help. I'm going to provide you this, you're going to provide me that. We always forget a critical element. How long are we going to work together? That doesn't mean it won't change, because all sorts of things can happen in the course of that relationship. Customers can change, businesses change, priorities change, but if we know that Jane and Susie or Jane and Mark are going to work together for the next 6 months, we know what services we're going to exchange. We're both feeling very good about that. We've both attributed value to each of them. Within that 6 months, we are going to have exit ramps. We are going to have specific check-ins. Maybe that's once a month. Maybe that's once every 2 months. Maybe in the beginning, it's once a week, where we have an opportunity to say it's not working, where we explicitly have an exit ramp built in, exit ramps, plural, built in, so we can review, and if it's not working, we can leave the relationship or the activity without that very awkward, horrible, how do I address this? I have seen that unwind so many business relationships, so many friendships, and it's so unfortunate because it's easily solved. So we are going to have exit ramps where we can review where we are. And lastly, number 5, I talked a heck of a lot about relationships because I know I cannot do business here in France without them. I just can't. I won't get a foot in the door. It's a very small business community. Respecting your word is incredibly important here. So if I commit to do something and people realize that I don't have integrity with what I said, doors will start closing for me very quickly. That will get around. Again, France is a mosaic of all of these wonderful businesses that all know each other. And if you're not on the right side of that because you've been careless and thoughtless with your relationships, that will show. But that doesn't mean that sometimes it's just not working out. That doesn't mean that sometimes you just realize that this is not going to be a fruitful long-term activity. How can I end the activity without ending the relationship? And there needs to be thought put to that. My first piece of advice is commit to it until you said you wouldn't. Commit to it to the deadline that you gave it. See it through. Having said that, sometimes there are things that are out of our control. Sometimes we have to leave an activity or a business or a project. And if you're doing that with others, you need to be very thoughtful about how you do so. Again, you want the activity or the project to end, not the relationship. So assuming you're not at the point where you've got your exit ramps and you awkwardly are trying to address how you need to leave this situation, you just do it like an adult. You have the tough conversation. And you make it clear that it's about the product or the project or the activity. Hopefully, it's not about the person. And you find a graceful way to end it quietly. Because it's never about leaving. It's always about how you go. So, friends, there we are. Those are my 5 points about asking for help. And again, very much, I understand this, so very much through the lens of having lived in France, where relationships are paramount and they're so important, and trust and confidence is so important. And of course, as a business person who gets asked a lot of questions and is always willing to help. But I think we'll do better as a community when we do better as a community. When we consider how we can help one another, how we can grow, how we can share, how we can continue to thrive and to spread that widely. That's what I want to see in 2025. Not picking each other's brains. So I hope you liked this episode. If you did, please take time to rate it, or maybe send it to a friend. Perhaps you're looking at starting a new business with a friend, or you want to work on a project together. Send this to them and see what they think. Or send it to your colleague that's starting a new business and needs to rely on some expertise and needs to ask for help to get it done. So until the next time, my friend, just a few thoughts from Paris. À bientôt, mes amis.